President Trump enacting a 25% levy on most goods from Mexico and Canada, raising tariffs on Chinese goods by another 10%. China and Canada are already retaliating in response to these new tariffs. Canada immediately imposing tariffs on more than $20 billion in U.S. goods, more levies to come later this month. And Beijing is going to enact a 10 to 15% tariffs on several U.S. farm imports starting next week. Now, the tit-for-tat tariffs marking an escalation in already fraught tensions between the U.S. and some of its largest trading partners. Here to break it all down, we want to bring in Ed Mills. He's Raymond James Managing Director. And Ed, a lot for investors to digest here, just about 28 minutes ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street. I'm curious what you make of the fact that the Trump administration actually followed through with these tariffs and maybe what this signals here for the days and months to come.
Yeah, Seana, the concern that people had with President Trump was he going to be in a situation where he was crying wolf? We've had a lot of announcements. He said that these were going to go into effect. He alone has the authority to put them on and to take them off. I think with this, he needs to follow through and say that he's going to do this, or other leaders are not going to anticipate the other tariffs that he's also signed into an executive order, which is come April, reciprocal tariffs on autos, in addition to what we're doing with Canada and Mexico, which absolutely does impact autos, tariffs on semiconductors, lumber. You go down the list. The big debate for me right now is how long these last, what other countries can do to try to de-escalate this. I think this is bringing about an incredible amount of uncertainty. I'm here at our investor conference in Orlando for Raymond James, and every conversation is, how long does this last? Because a lot of deals, a lot of investors are very uncertain, and a lot of things are frozen until we get that certainty, Seana.
Ed, what do you think the risk to the economy looks like? When you break it down by the pricing pressures this could potentially add, how much this could weigh on economic growth going forward?
Seana, I think the thing that I've been most focused on is consumer sentiment to begin with. We have a lot of financial advisors here at Raymond James. I'm getting a lot of questions from them, getting questions from their clients in terms of exactly how this is going to increase or decrease anything that they get at the store. To the extent that there is a concern that this is going to be stickier, back in 2017 when President Trump first started putting tariffs on, there was concerns about inflation, but that wasn't the learned experience. Now, because we've had as much inflation as we've had over the last several years, concerns about inflation impact consumer sentiment so much greater. So does consumer sentiment impact kind of what people do? And then if prices actually do go up because of these tariffs, if they are on for a longer period of time, that's when we have a greater economic pullback. That's where we've been talking with our economists about, are there updates to his economic outlook? He says not yet. But if these are stickier, he absolutely will have to update his economic projections here for this rest of the year.
So then, Ed, circling back to the question that you've been getting this week at your investor conference, how worried should investors then be about these tariffs?
I think they have to pay attention. I think it is a to be determined how worried they absolutely have to be. When I've talked to folks within the Trump administration, people who've done trade for him, what they tell me is to break it up in two different buckets. Bucket number one is really significant threats of tariffs and potentially implementation for short periods of time to get policy changes. And those policy changes could be really helpful and favorable to U.S. business interests, especially if they open up opportunity for us to sell more things globally, and things ultimately could get less expensive for consumers. Bucket number two is there is a portion of this that is going to stay on more permanently that raises revenue. Donald Trump has talked about the creation of the External Revenue Service. Congress wants to extend out the Trump tax cuts. Republicans are seeking to make that permanent. So to the extent that that's covered to provide the certainty of the tax policy over the next couple of years, if we get that certainty, that's positive. But right now, we're probably at or near maximum uncertainty today with these new tariffs and over the next month as we get those reciprocal tariffs. So uncertainty right now, worry. I think it's to be determined how worried you need to be, Seana.
Ed, what do you think the global economic implications look like?
I think that this is uncharted territory. We are looking at putting tariffs on countries that have historically been our neighbors. historically been our allies. When we look at some of the statements coming out of President Trump yesterday about building car manufacturing here in the United States, well, we've had NAFTA since the 90s, and he, in his first administration, signed the USMCA, the United States, Mexico, Canada Free Trade Agreement, as an update to NAFTA, which affirmed kind of having these joint supply chains between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And so to the extent that you have a president who established a free trade agreement and then is now completely changing the rules of the road in going after countries that we've had military alliances with for kind of since the beginning of our country, that uncertainty is getting everyone to ask the question of what does U.S. economic leadership look like into the next 4 years?
And Ed, as we look forward to tonight, President Trump is going to hold his first joint address to Congress here in just a few hours from now. I guess, what are the top things that you will be listening for in that address?
Yeah, I want to know if there's any give on these tariffs. I want to understand exactly what his economic agenda will be. Since the beginning of his administration, he signed more than 110 executive orders and executive actions. Is he going to outline how he's going to implement that? I want to understand his geopolitical outlook. We've had negotiations with Netanyahu. We've had negotiations with Zelensky to different degrees of success. What is his goal going forward on American leadership? What is the path forward on government funding? We have a March 14th government funding deadline that looks like we could be headed towards a government shutdown. How does he want to deal with that? What tone does he strike? And how is he going to provide the leadership to navigate through these very significant economic and geopolitical risks?
Certainly we'll be listening for that tonight. Ed Mills, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Seana.